As pressure builds in Washington for police reform, NBC News reporting a bipartisan group of lawmakers working on that George Floyd Justice in Policing Act that has already passed in the House. Quote, negotiations have been ongoing between Senator Tim Scott, Senator Cory Booker, Congresswoman Karen Bass, who sponsored the House bill, but the group has not reached a compromise or made significant progress. Senator Scott told reporters he sees a path forward. Quote, I think we are on the verge of wrapping this up in the next week or two. Washington Post is on the board with reporting that Democrats are pushing to pass the George Floyd legislation by May 25th. That, of course, would be the first anniversary of George Floyd's death. Back with us tonight to talk about all of it, Sam Stein, veteran journalist who is these days White House editor at Politico, and Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, former lieutenant governor of the great state of Maryland, also happens to be the host of the Michael Steele podcast. And, Michael, I'd like to begin with you, indeed. Exactly the point we discussed at this very hour last night with Brittany Packnett-Cunningham. People heard the Chauvin verdict, people who've been on the fence about police reform saying, well, that's done. We need not worry about it anymore. I read you a quote from AXIOS. Senior Democratic and Republican aides who would never let their bosses say so on the record privately told Axios the Chauvin convictions have, wait for it, lessened pressure for change. They noted the aftermath of mass shootings. Time and again, Congress has failed to pass gun control legislation, and the conversation ultimately moves on until another terrible event occurs. Michael, at this rate, they're occurring every other day. What's the chance we see anything substantial on this?
Well, you better see something. The substantial nature of it will depend on just how serious the leaders in the House and the Senate are, and certainly how much pressure comes from the streets of this country. But, those staffers are speaking truth. And those members, their bosses who believe that this conviction has lessened the urgency, they realize, of course, on the day that the conviction was put on the street, when we heard that this man had been found guilty, that another black teenager was killed. So what makes you think people are just going to go, well, that's done, and ignore what happened on the 20 minutes before the verdict was read? So this sort of Washington sort of fog about events, and this sort of wishing it away, and is seemingly believing that because, this act, which is everybody was seriously, concerned about, has now been taken care of, that takes care of police shootings, that solves the issues about policing in black communities and this idea of how you can reform this process. No, it doesn't. It makes it more urgent. And these members had better not think they can sleep on this, because come next November, if they haven't done something, some of them, hopefully a lot of them, will be looking for a job.
Sam Stein, Walter Mondale, who we are fondly remembering this week, famously said to the Democratic National Convention, Ronald Reagan's going to raise your taxes. He won't tell you. I just did. And a lot of people tied his lack of success at the polls after that, in part, to that comment. It is part of the Democratic playbook, if we can typify such behavior, to raise taxes on the wealthy. Enter Joe Biden. Today, the notion of raising taxes on wealthy investors, the money would be earmarked for child care and education, with the caveat, Sam, that Joe Biden needs the wealthy. The wealthy tend to like their money. He needs the business community. Business makes Wall Street go, and a bear market's, a problem.
Yeah, there's a lot at play here. One is that Biden did run on these platforms. They weren't hidden. He was going to raise the taxes on the wealthy. He was going to raise taxes on corporations, roll back Trump-era tax cuts, and he was elected for it. And if you look at the public opinion polling, when you poll those specific provisions, it's interesting. On the infrastructure plan, for instance, the plan gets more popular when you tell people that it's paid for by a hike in the corporate tax rate. So it's possible that the politics of this are dramatically different than they were in 1984, for instance. That being said, if you talk to any Republican around town, They look at this as a potential opportunity. They want to hammer away at Biden. They want to accuse him and reclaim the mantle that he's going to scuffle the economic growth of the Trump era if he raises taxes at this point in time, whether on corporations or on individual earners. I'm not totally sure how successful it's going to be, partially because they're distracted by a bunch of other cultural war stuff, but also because you have groups like the Chamber of Commerce right now, which is undergoing its own metamorphosis and coming out in favor of a lot of Democratic priorities, opening up to cap and trade legislation, for instance. So it's possible that the tectonic plates of politics have shifted dramatically and that we're in a different position now. Biden certainly hopes it. He's praying for it. Republicans are not going to sit by and not take advantage of it or try to. But this is, one of those issues that could define, as Michael said, the policing, it could define 2020. This certainly will define 2020.
Gentlemen, lightning round. I'm going to give you 45 seconds each. Don't make me come out there. Michael Steele, now that you're in the podcast business, you know exactly how long 45 seconds is. Here's the question. Will we see any kind of infrastructure legislation signed by the president in calendar year 2021?
I think right now you will. And I think that the fact that you've got Tim Scott, you've got other Republicans out there that are leaning in that direction is a good sign for something to get done. It's not going to be what Republicans have put on the table, the $586 billion. It's not going to be what the president put on the table, his $2 trillion, but it'll be something. And I think America will applaud it.
Look at you all podcasty and aware of how long 45 seconds is. Okay, Sam, same thing.
I get 45 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Question is, will there be a proposal? The answer is yes, it will be signed.
Yeah.
I don't even need the remaining.
I
don't need the remaining 30 seconds. I yield them.
Wow.
Back.
Yield back his time. I'll take it.
He yields back his time, and I'm not going to share it with the gentleman from the great state of Maryland. I can't thank you both enough. Two great friends of this broadcast for good reason, as you just saw. Sam Stein, Michael Steele. We'll do this again. Coming